Sapna arrived at school and walked the gentle slope to meet her friends. She knew everyone, and everyone knew her, and they were pleased to see her too. Soon the playground was full and the bell rang. Assembly, and time to line up. As she had done so many times before, she closed her ebony eyes and prayed. She prayed for knowledge and wisdom, and for her brothers and sisters too. She prayed for her teachers and her country. She prayed for others and their futures and their happiness. And she meant every word. Her lips moved so softly as she joined her brothers and sisters as one. And when the prayers were over and the singing too, her eyes opened and she began to listen to Auntie, her principal and head teacher of her school. Auntie knew a lot. Her husband had been Prajan of the village, and he knew a lot too. For a big country, there was very little that was secret from open ears. And if you listened carefully, you could learn a lot. And Sapna listened very carefully indeed. It had been here that she had learnt about the floods and the fires. It was here that she had learnt about life and death. It was here that she had learnt about right and wrong, good and bad. It was here that she had learnt about greed and poverty, fairness and truth. And she listened. She listened a lot. And as she listened, she learnt a great many things too. She wouldn't tell you this herself, but Sapna was becoming wise. There were many things she liked in her world, and many things she did not. She knew what was good and what was bad, and she wanted to do something about it. She knew that things must change, and change for good. And this morning, Auntie spoke about the road. She spoke about the road that was coming to Kempty, to Sanji, and to Kandikal, her home. She spoke about how it was going to be new and bigger than the road that she had driven along this morning. She said how wide it was going to be, and how the big trucks could drive along it easily, and how some of the villages to the north had already been knocked down and pushed away so that the road could be built, the road that would soon reach them. And then Sapna started to look around. She saw Neelam, her teacher, who worked in her family's shop in Kandikal, a shop by the side of the road. And she looked at Mansi, who lived in Batoli, in a beautiful white house that sat by the side of the road. And she looked at Tonya, who lived high up in Kempty Falls in a flat that overlooked the side of the road. And then she looked at their faces and thought of what this would mean to them. And then she thought of Kempty. For many weeks of the year it was quiet, but when the summer came, the little town got busy, very busy indeed. She thought of the huge buses that belched dirty smoke and fumes, so the people who walked along the road felt sick. She thought of the litter that was thrown from the windows, and the people who were rude and got drunk. She didn't want this to happen anymore, and she certainly didn't want it to get any worse. But the road would make it worse. And it would make the land worse too. All the digging and the explosions and the machines would make her land worse. The soil would fall down the hillside and the trees would be knocked down. Her friends would lose their homes and would have to move. Why? Because of decisions. Decisions that she had been no part of. No one had asked her, and it was her country too. And with these thoughts in her head, she turned, walked up the steps and into her classroom. And although she tried her best not to, she couldn't get the thought of the new road from her mind. It stuck there, and it stuck fast. Through the middle of her thoughts drifted the voice of her teacher, Ravi sir. He had seen the little girl with so much on her mind, and it puzzled him. But he continued and tried to bring the girl from her troubles with the lessons that he taught. He spoke about a great man, Gandhiji, the father of all India. He spoke about his humble clothes and his bright mind. He spoke about how long ago Gandhi had shown the Britishers that you could win battles without force, without violence, without hate. Just simple belief and determination. And Sapna began to listen. She heard the story of how, by using simple methods, Gandhi showed that belief was stronger than a bullet and how determination was more important than reward. She heard how nearly 100 years ago this man had led others in protest to walk, sit, and not fight, and in doing so freed millions of people. Be the change you wish to see in the world, he had said, and had sat down with them too. And as she listened, she learned. That night, as the sun began to set, she travelled home on the school bus as she had done 1,000 times before. But this time was different. True, her eyes stared at the mountains around her, but her eyes did not see. Her mind was full of thoughts, and there were many that she could not understand. Not yet, anyway. On the other side of the mountain, the great yellow monster stood silent. Its work for the day was done. By its side, its owner counted dirty brown notes, and there were many of them. They flicked through his cracked fingers, each one showing a house, a home, a path that now was no more. Silently, he folded the rupees into two and pushed them deep into his pocket. Now they were his. And reaching towards the back of the yellow monster, he pulled out a tired and tatty cover and spread it over the ground. And then, finding sticks that had so recently been part of a lofty pine tree, he lifted the sheet high into the air to make a shelter, a tent for the night. He gathered his belongings together and by the light of a small fire counted his money once again. And in the glow of the flickering flames, his eyes sparkled with greed. He was pleased, very pleased indeed, and tomorrow would bring him more riches. That night he slept very well. But Sapna could not. No matter what she tried, sleep to her would not come simply. She walked outside into the cool night air and stared into the skies above her. They were as black as the deepest velvet and were lined with millions of diamonds that stretched on forever. And there was the moon. She looked at it as it hung within the heavens, white, round, and seen the world over. It glowed with the same feeling that she felt within her heart, a warmth and brightness within a world of darkness and confusion. She was not alone. She listened to the sounds of the night. Far away a dog barked, and behind her she heard the rustling of some type of night creature deep within the forest. She heard the chickens and the goats safely sleeping in the shed, and once more heard the snoring sounds of her brother Kuldeep. No, she was not alone at all. And Sapna smiled. And as she looked at her world that night, she saw the beauty within it. Yes, she'd woken every morning of her life and seen the self-same things, but this morning she saw its beauty too. She saw the shadows of the night fade away and the mists of the morning cling like tiny clouds to the mountain tops. She saw the silhouettes of the birds as they started their early morning scramble for food, and she saw the darkened peaks of the jagged mountains first become black, then fill with colour as the day began. She saw things truly for the first time. It was as though she was dreaming through open eyes, and what she saw was hers and her world's too. Breathless beauty all around. But now, not so far away, the yellow monster coughed again and roared once more into life. The man's eyes glinted in the morning sun, and he pulled his scarf around his face to stop the belching smoke cloud his eyes. He and his machine had work to do. Another day, another job, another rupee. Soon they would be at Kempsey. The shelter for the night was safely stored away, and all that was left were the smouldering remains of the fire. Ashes left by the side of the road. In the playground, Sapna sought out Ravi Sir. She had many questions that she needed to be answered, and she needed the answers now. Her hands were wild with animation as she spoke faster than her tongue would allow. Ravi listened to the little girl with fascination as she asked such simple questions that needed such long answers. He was an adult, and adults always give long answers. Why do we need a road? Why do we have to change? Why are we not happy with what we have? Why do we need more? Why? By now, quite a crowd had gathered, and the little girl continued, oblivious to the attraction that she was causing. What about Neelam, Mom? What about Mansi? What about Tonya? What about their families? What about their futures? What about their homes? By now, Ravi was feeling uncomfortable, and the warming of the day made matters even worse. But Sapna felt nothing of this, and she continued with her questions. What about the mountains? What about the fields? What about the pollution? What about our world? And then, as swiftly as a switch can be turned off, she stopped and looked around her. She saw her friends, her teachers, the little children too, all simply staring at her, and felt their eyes touch her soul. She heard their silence too, and saw their open mouths. She saw the questions in their eyes and felt that she wanted to hide away from their eyes, hide away from their silence, hide away from what she had caused. And she did. And she cried. It was Neelam who found her. She was hiding where the youngest children played, far away from her friends. She wanted to be alone. Carefully, Neelam put her arm around her and pulled her tight. She said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. She wasn't alone anymore. It had been a long day for Sapna and the yellow monster too. The heat bore down now upon the same mountain and showed no sign of relenting. But the monster and the children hid in the shade. It was simply too hot. Too hot for work and too hot for school. The man wasn't happy about his day. The sun had slowed his work, and he looked behind him. He surveyed his work through narrowed eyes. The once green path was now a road, and the broken trees hung limply off the cliff slope. But high above, the rocks were crumbling and the mountain slowly moving. That night, he slept closer to the yellow monster than before. But with every stone that slipped and every rock that tumbled, he stirred within his sleep. The mountain was much bigger than he and his yellow monster. Much bigger indeed. He felt the money within his pocket, held it firmly and tried to sleep. But no matter how he tried, sleep did not come easy that night. Sapna had spoken to her father. She told him of his day, of her day, and the playground and the questions and the silence, and of Neelam and of the tears, and the questions that still remained unanswered. Why? She once again asked. Why? Her father looked at his daughter and remembered his time at school. He remembered the stories of Gandhiji and remembered them well. He remembered what he had stood for and what he had said, and remembered his words to her. The world has enough for everyone's needs, but not enough for everyone's greeds. And he smiled at his daughter, kissed her on the head, and made his way back into their home. Sapna watched her father walk away, and she picked herself up and off the floor. The day was still hot, and although the night would soon be here, she turned and made her way up the mountainside. She knew where she was going.